All right. Good morning, everybody.
Hey, John.
Bruno, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Not bad. How do I put this PowerPoint on the stage? There we go. Thank you, Adam. Okay. Welcome, everybody. So we're pretty excited about this. We're going to go through and talk a bit about how we can help speed up test automation, both through test orchestration and better test creation. So Bruno and I actually used to work together, so this is pretty exciting that we get to kind of get back at it. So it should be a fun little webinar, and hopefully we provide you guys some valuable information. Just to go a little bit about who we are and our background. My name's John. As you can see, I'm a new dad, which means I'm pretty sleep deprived. Grew up in Rhode Island, which doesn't sound like an accomplishment, but if you ever meet another Rhode Islander, we get really excited about it. So I don't know if there's anybody from Rhode Island on the phone, but if you are, hello. Been in the tech industry for about 15 years, and I help lead the POC process at Testkube. My job's to make sure that we understand the problems that folks are trying to solve and help translate how Testkube could address those problems. And I'm super passionate about working with our customers, learning new things. I'm new to the DevOps space, so I've been learning quite a bit, and it's been great. And I make smoothies for breakfast. I already drank mine, so I can't show you an example, but it's one of my other things I love.
It's a tough one to follow, but so I am from Boston. I've been in the tech space for about 20 years, 8 years in automation. Big fan of animals. Currently have one cat. And when I'm not helping people streamline their testing, I like gardening and woodworking and a whole bunch of other stuff. My morning typically starts with espresso. So not a smoothie, but something to still kickstart the day.
Cool. I've had the jerky. It's very good.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's first talk a little bit about testing in general and why we think it's a bit of a pressure cooker right now. And there's a number of different reasons, but the two that we're going to focus on right now are faster delivery and complexity in the SDLC. So on the faster delivery side, what we really mean by that is the ability for people to ship code faster. And there's a number of influences for that. If we go back in time, some of us may remember a day where we literally had walls between dev and QA, and the dev team would work on something for 6 to 8 months and then send it to the QA team, and they would work on it for 3-ish months, and then they do a release at the end of the year. And now teams have the ability in a lot of organizations to release daily, and they have a ton of tooling that helps support that process. So between different social processes like Agile and DevOps and all those things, and then different tooling processes, we have the ability to deliver faster. And unfortunately, even going back to the day of really siloed kind of delivery streams, testing is a bottleneck in the sense, or at least it's viewed as something that can be, I don't say optional, but if something's going to be prioritized, it's usually, unfortunately, the testing aspect of things. So that's one thing. How can we still meet our quality goals with that pressure of delivering things faster? And add on top of that, all of the AI tools that are being developed that let you just create code a ton faster, right? You have to test that code because sometimes it's really great, but sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do. And on the second side, we have the SDLC complexity, and that's related to shift left. We see a lot of teams that are trying to put pressure on the development team to participate in more parts of the process to break down those silos. And that's awesome because it gives them the ability to understand the holistic software delivery lifecycle. But at the same time, that means that there's lots of different tools now that they may be using to help do their job. And navigating that landscape with tons of tools can be challenging. Especially when we're talking about testing tools and the kind of availability of open source and commercial, and it's quite a bit of a large ecosystem. And then cloud-native, right? That's also something that it's a well-developed space, but there's a lot of teams who are trying to still figure out what does it mean to deploy and to work in a cloud native environment where we have environments that are managed ephemerally, and we have to have tooling that supports that. And how do we get our testing that's maybe traditionally run on VMs in some cases and apply that to a cloud native environment? So that can, again, create a bottleneck where those tests are unable to interact with the new architecture of a cloud native world when they're kind of built on maybe a less cloud native ecosystem. Bruno, anything to add there? Or?
Sorry, I was muted. No, honestly, like everything that you're mentioning there is just on point. You know, everything that we experience as well. So
cool.
So this, on the other hand, are a lot of the things that I come across in my day-to-day when, you know, talking to people about their test creation and their test coverage and all that. You know, I'm sure some of these really hit home with some people. You know, but when it comes down to it, you know, there's always a need to automate complex scenarios, but systems can't do it. So teams want to automate end-to-end flows, multi-step business logic, dynamic UIs, integrations, but a lot of automation tools just simply don't support them. You know, so you end up with gaps in the entire flow, and that, once again, is just one part of that complexity. Creating tests takes too long. That's a, you know, even when automation is possible, creating tests is slow. You know, writing scripts, debugging selectors, waiting on environments, all of that is going to add to that. And, you know, our test coverage is low. We can't catch up. You know, that's a direct result of slow test creation. And leveraging something like testRigor, we're basically giving those less technical people the ability to help create that automation, because it's just going to be in plain English. You know, obviously missing bugs and having those make it out to production are usually problematic. You know, they aren't just minor defects. They can be customer-facing issues that really impact major things. And we're all pretty aware of some of those that happened recently. You know, blue screens of death that come up and, you know, take down entire, you know, airlines and whatnot. So, you know, there's a very, you know, it's obviously very problematic when releasing any sort of bugs to production. But along with that, you know, test maintenance prevents us from creating new tests, because once again, let's say the UI is constantly changing. Staying on top of that is really difficult. Once again, by using plain English, testRigor is not relying on implementation details or the name of those selectors or anything like that. Very, very flexible. You know, so that's just a starting point. But obviously, there's many other things that can cause, you know, delays in software releases. But this is just a quick summary of that.
And we see a lot of these same problems too. And it's interesting because when we sometimes engage with people who are, you know, trying to figure out what we do, they'll be like, "Do you guys do test creation? Because we don't have any tests." And we'll say, "No, we don't. We do orchestration." But so we see a lot of this from the other side. Cool. So obviously we have these challenges, right? And we have all these problems that are created from these pressures. But how do we balance the fact that we need to do more testing, and we need to do more comprehensive testing, and probably across a bunch of different technologies, while also maintaining the timelines that have been placed upon us, and even better if we can reduce those timelines? So like, how do we make that balance happen? I was pretty proud of the slide because I put the little rock balancing, so that's pretty exciting. And that's where testRigor and Testkube can be used together and hopefully come together to help solve those problems. On the Testkube side with orchestration, making it easy to deploy existing test cases into any environment where you need to run those tests. I actually worked with a customer a number of months ago, back in August, who was using testRigor, and their particular problem was that they have a bunch of end-to-end tests and functional tests in testRigor. They have some load tests in K6. They also had some security tests, and they also had a team that was trying to do like actual infrastructure testing of the Kubernetes environments they were going to. So like, how do they bring all that into one spot, and how do they make it easy to navigate that?
That makes a lot of sense. And on the testRigor side, testRigor's main focus is helping to speed up the test creation and validate that the application is functionally correct without requiring a developer, which is one of the things that really does slow down test creation. By leveraging multiple parallels, you have the ability to once again scale and execute test cases faster, and typically with less bugs. And testRigor also has some great AI functionality, which will help with test creation, troubleshooting, as well as test maintenance. And there's even new functionality that's coming out that can actually write code and deploy that code. So a whole bunch of new stuff out on the horizon.
By the way, before we move along, I just wanted to highlight that we have these QR codes that are at the bottom of the slides. We know folks may have to drop early, so if you do want to get more information, both of these, if you scan these codes, they'll bring you to a page where you can get more information on either testRigor or Testkube. So I just wanted to highlight that. It'll be on every slide, so as we go through.
Yeah, good reminder. Thanks. So when it comes down to testRigor, some of the biggest challenges that we come across is that, I've already mentioned it a couple of times, but creating automation takes a very skilled, very expensive person. And, along with that, typically infrastructure is limited. So with that plain English, we're allowing really anybody that knows how to use the application and how to type on a keyboard, the ability to create test cases. And along with that, it's gonna be very, very easy to, streamline those test cases, run them over and over again, repeatedly, and once again, validate that we're not experiencing any sort of bugs or any sort of flakiness when it comes down to the test. And then, as you can see, bottom left, testRigor focuses highly on reducing maintenance, because once again, if one thing changes in your application, do you now have to go to 50 different test cases and make that change? I hope not. In testRigor, you don't. You go to one specific thing, a reusable rule that we call it internally. You make your change there, and that change gets pushed out everywhere else. So super, super easy. And along with that, once again, we talked about parallel executions. And one of the biggest, coolest parts about testRigor is the fact that we support a variety of different applications. So mainframe, API, web, native desktop, native mobile, really, a whole bunch. And did I say mainframe already? I might have, but okay. That's just one that, honestly, in all my years of being in the automation space and in tech space, automating something like a mainframe application is typically unheard of. So the fact that we've recently released that functionality has been huge.
Yeah, we have a lot of customers in the banking space, and they often ask about, we still have some mainframe stuff that we need to run, and we want to kind of run it with the rest of our stuff too.
Yep, and you can with testRigor. So we then get down to this awesome story about Keith. Keith, you probably can't tell from the picture how gigantic he is, but Keith is a very large man. He used to play football. However, since his times playing football, he's moved on to, bigger and better things. So VP of engineering at IDT. He was originally hired and they had zero automation in place. And he basically said, okay, no automation in place. Great. I'll get automation going for you. And he spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort. And he was able to get about 33%, or actually 30% of their test cases automated. And that was in the first year. And his bosses were blown away. They were super excited. They gave him a bunch of stock. Really, really happy. However, the next year, he basically put the same sort of effort, same amount of resources into it, and they were only able to tick up 1%. So they went from 30 to about 31, 32. And, he did the same thing the following year, threw more money, more resources, and they only got to 34%. So he was basically really worried that he was going to, lose his job if he wasn't going to be able to get to that number that he promised. And, that's a huge thing, being worried that you're going to lose your job because you can't deliver. So Keith looked out in the market, found testRigor. And these numbers are pretty impressive, but he was able to provide testRigor licenses to some offshore people and actually create automation across 91% of their test cases in less than 9 months. So those numbers right there are pretty staggering. Like it's very impressive what he was able to do. And, his bosses were so happy with the changes and everything that, he was basically able to retire. And, sometimes he bounces around and comes to conferences with us and tells his story live. And once again, it's awesome hearing that story directly from him, because obviously I missed some of those details, but it's just hugely impactful when you can see something like that. 91% automation in 9 months. Wow. So just to once again kind of talk to why other people are choosing testRigor, so we've already mentioned it a couple of times, but faster releases. It's all about releasing faster and better. So fewer bugs in production, less time for maintenance. Once again, as mentioned, we have some built-in functionality that allows you to make minor changes and push those changes elsewhere. So all about speeding up everything. And as you can see, all of those bullet points are pretty much focused directly on that. So then, some major features. Once again, I've kind of touched on it earlier, but the fact that no coding is required. testRigor does support JavaScript if necessary, but for the most part, you can do pretty much everything without code. I mentioned that built-in reusable functionality, so that's really cool. And then, once again, very limited maintenance. So if something in your UI changes, you don't have to go to all these test cases and make those changes. You could typically just change the one reusable rule or that one page and push those changes everywhere else. I mentioned earlier about the cross-platform support. So as you can see, once again, native apps, native desktop, mobile, web, mainframe, all that, along with cross-browser support. So if you are trying to test across different browsers as well as different platforms, that's all supported. We also support, executing test cases through CI/CD, and you can see some various integrations in there with other tools. And once again, the AI. AI is a big thing, but functionality inside of testRigor without the AI is still quite impressive. AI is obviously a really great feature that a lot of people are jumping on, but AI, just like in a lot of other scenarios, AI is a great tool, not something that is going to replace you. So keep that in mind. So even though AI is everywhere, a human is always going to have to be there to validate that AI did things correctly or not. All right, so additionally, we have multiple ways of creating test cases. So as mentioned earlier, generative AI, we can write them in plain English syntax, which once again, very, very easy. There is a recording option. We have both a live recorder that's in the system, and then we have a Chrome extension, which will record obviously in a Chrome window. If you're not testing in Chrome, then that live mode functionality works across all of the other testing types. So if you are looking to do desktop testing, you can spin up a live session of your desktop application. And then we have the ability to import test cases from test case management tools. So TestRail, X-Ray, Zephyr, and Azure DevOps. All right. So now let's get into a little demo of testRigor. And let me share my screen, and we're going to just pull that out there. All right. And this over here just to make sure. Okay, cool. I can see my screen. Beautiful. All right. So just a couple of things here. So each item that you're seeing in here is a test case. Once again, test cases can be created a bunch of different ways. You can see up here, add test case. And I could just type in some commands. I could give a description and have AI create it. I could provide additional context for the AI to help with that. But then we can also generate test cases based on a specific feature description. So this right here was John just putting in a generic explanation of Testkube, but we let that just kind of do its thing. However, I've gone in and created a couple other tests. So some are just very basic tests, where this one here is just getting to the page, making sure that the page is available, and more specifically, that it says get started at the top of the page, or just more specifically on the page. If I wanted to validate that it was specifically at the top of the page or to the left of get a demo, I could do that. I could specifically say, check that page contains get started to the left of, once again, get a demo, or to the right of resources, or whatever we want to do there, if we need to. Additionally, I've taken and tweaked a couple other things. So we have a test case here that just goes from the Testkube page. It then goes to the testRigor website and then just clicks on the menu, once again, just to show some very, very basic functionality. However, that's not very exciting. Down here, we get into more of a realistic flow. And when I say realistic, I just mean like lots and lots of steps. So what we did here is I started off going to Testkube, going to the actual Testkube app. So from there, we're here. And we get this little cookie pop-up. I decline that cookie pop-up. And then from there, testRigor has some really cool functionality where we can generate data for you. So in this case here, I'm generating a unique email address. That email address is going to a testRigor-mail domain, which means that I could actually not only send an email to that inbox, but I can also then go check for that email. And that's exactly what I did here. So first I generate it, then I click the button to the right of work email, which is that purple button. From there, it sends out our link. So your link is on its way. So then my next action, check that email to that email address that I created, which is now known as new email, was received. So then in this next link, you can see that this is the email. And then I click on login now. And then from there, we're in the application. So we're actually in Testkube at this point. So now I'm not very well versed in Testkube, to be completely honest. So what I did is I just clicked not sure over here. So click not sure. And then I told it to click the continue button below not sure. Because with testRigor, if I just said click continue, it's most likely going to click on this one. Because testRigor works the same way a human does. It's going to read things left to right, top to bottom. So my command in here, once again, click continue below not sure. So it found not sure, and then found the continue below it. And there we go. After that, we have our page load. And then the next pop-up here is a little pop-up, little dialog box just talking about, the tour through Testkube. So I basically tell it to click let's go. And then I tell it to click next until the page contains thank you. And once again, this is just because I didn't know if it said next 12 times, obviously probably 7 times since the number here. But with it, it's going to automatically basically look at that page. If it says thank you anywhere on this page, it's going to stop that step. So in my case, it performs 1, 2, 3. There's a bunch of nexts. And then once again, it gets to this page where it says thank you. And we're happy. From there, I actually click on thank you. And now we're on this page. And this is basically our, the Testkube, the Testkube like landing page. So if at this point I did want to add additional steps, I could easily go into a live mode session or just add the test steps manually. If I want to click get a demo or click close this box or anything like that, I could easily do so in one of those live mode sessions. So just for an example, I'm going to click open my debug over here. The debug will open up our live mode session. So what you'll see here is, once again, whatever the testing type is, you're going to see this spin that up. So this is going to take, 30 seconds, maybe. And then there's some extra buttons here in regards to how are we going to interact with the screen. Do we want to let testRigor generate the command and execute the command, or do we want to control the execution? So personally, I like to control the execution, so I set it to generate command. And then this other dropdown is how exactly are we going to work with any sort of inputs? So do we want to put in data automatically, or do you want to specifically put in your own data, or do you just want to generate a click command? So for now, I'm gonna say, let me modify my value. And then I'm just gonna click execute here. So it's gonna take all of the steps that I already had in my test case and execute all of those. And then from there, if I want to add any additional steps to this flow, I can, because once again, this is the live mode session. So anything I do in the session is going to be captured and stored as a new test case. So once again, if I wanted to click on any of those buttons towards the end, I could easily do so. So once again, this is just performing all those actions, creating screenshots, storing those all down below. And then at the top, we have, once again, that page that we're waiting to get to the thank you for. And there we go. Clicks thank you, and there we are. So once again, now, if I knew exactly what I wanted to do, I could just go ahead and do so. If I wanted to just get a better understanding of how testRigor might see some of these elements, I could generate locator options, and then I could just go around and click. So you can see I just clicked on the get a demo button, and yes, testRigor came back with get a demo. Perfect. But it also shows coordinates. So if for some strange reason there's no name or there's no other way of clicking on that element, I can use these coordinates. And I know typically coordinates are frowned upon within automation, but all of the test cases that are running inside of testRigor are always going to run in the same resolution unless you go in and actively change something. But that same coordinate will hold true across your testing. So, so if I leave that and I just say, click element with coordinate and I execute that, it's going to go ahead and click on get a demo. So you can see that little red dot representing where that action is done. And once again, the screenshot along with, once again, where that click was being done. So that's just a quick way of seeing, how easy it is to interact with the screen or click around and create additional steps. So right there, I just clicked on docs, but let's do this instead. Generate command and execute. So if I click on docs, it creates the command, executes the command, and then I just have to wait for a refreshed page here. So,
and Bruno, before we get too far from it, we did have two questions on that. It looks like this one might be applicable to this last one, but how the test cases handle dynamic data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, inside of testRigor, we're not relying on the actual implementation details. I mentioned that earlier, but that's a key part of it. And along with it, let's see here. Sorry, resources, documentation. So once again, with dynamic elements or dynamic text, that's fine. But there's going to be something within there that is consistent. So with that, referencing locations. So testRigor leverages a variety of different attributes when trying to target elements. So if the text for that element is what's dynamic, and that keeps on changing, then we don't use it. Instead, maybe we use the placeholder or the value or the name or, I don't know, one of the IDs. That's the beauty of testRigor, is that it's so very flexible. So, using any of these attributes will help testRigor find the specific elements in question. And if we need to get a little bit more specific, we can add some additional things like the type. So for example, if we're trying to click on a button that says search, we could say click button search instead of just click search. Because if I say click search, it's going to find the first instance of the word search and click on that. But if I'm specifically looking for a button or a link or a label, then I could use the type to be that much more specific. And adding a little bit more specificity to it, we could then use locational references. Like in that test case, I showed the below option. Below will literally look directly below the word that you're looking for. However, if you add something like the word roughly to it, then instead of looking just below it like this, it's going to look below it like this. So it's going to check the entire lower part of the screen instead of just directly below that word. So once again, dynamic elements or objects don't really impact testRigor in the long run. It's just more a matter of knowing that it's dynamic so we can, change the test case to work with it from the start. But great question, whoever asked that. All right. So with that, I think that pretty much rounds off what I was going to show on the testRigor side. Obviously, this is just a quick little intro, more to just wet your whistle and have you want to come in and test it more. But as you can see, there's a variety of other things in here. Reporting is available. This is obviously going to be highly based on using labels and having lots of test cases. In this suite, we don't really have a lot. There's only the 3 that we had, plus that one that I just created using live mode. But very, very easy to, once again, create test cases, troubleshoot these test cases, and, really expand your test coverage and your executions. Let's see, were there any other questions in this chat for me? Okay, I don't believe so. All right, cool.
There was one other question on
how to integrate Testkube and testRigor. All right. That's actually going to be a question for John, because John did that actual setup. So I'm going to let him take that one. But Evan, was there another question or?
Yeah, that's good for now. And thanks for asking that question, because it's a perfect kind of segue into what's next.
Awesome.
Okay, how do I get on stage?
There you go.
Thank you. Just to kind of address these, so I will show how we can integrate with testRigor, but there was also a chat that I was having in the chat system while Bruno was demoing about, why would we use testRigor with Testkube in the first place? So the answer for that depends on your environment and I guess the collection of tests that you have. So if you're just using testRigor and that's the only testing tool you have, then using a tool like Testkube does not make sense, because Testkube is focusing on orchestration. And as we'll see, orchestration is the, combination of a few different things. It's a combination of your test catalog and all the tests you're trying to run. It's a combination of trigger points, the actual execution of the tests, and where does that execution take place, and then being able to inspect the outcome of those test cases. So in a world where you have lots of different testing tools, and it's a mix of open source and then something commercial like testRigor, and maybe you're also doing device testing or whatever it may be, that's when it makes sense to complement testRigor with Testkube, because you have possibly orchestration challenges with triggering all those different test types and then putting all the results into one spot and making it available for teams to find the open source, but also the testRigor tests. Especially if you have different teams who are responsible for running different tests, different personas that are involved. And that's kind of what this slide is trying to show from a Testkube perspective of the challenge that we see with orchestration in a more generalized sense, which is a gap between the people who are responsible for maintaining Kubernetes environments in the platform and the infrastructure, and the people who are responsible for building a testing and quality ecosystem. Oftentimes, the people who are building that testing and quality ecosystem don't have expertise in Kubernetes, but they may have to execute those tests, run those tests on Kubernetes. And that's where the DevOps team, platform team comes in. They have to set that up. And they may not know a lot about the tests, and they don't really want to be debugging things for the testing team. They just want to make it so it's kind of self-service and the testing team can go do what they need to do, and they can be fairly hands-off once it's set up. So we see ourselves as sitting at the intersection of those two teams and those two problems, because Testkube allows the DevOps team to make the tests executable in Kubernetes in a self-service way. So the QA team can just come to Testkube and say, I want to run this collection of test cases that span, like I said, case 6, some security stuff, maybe runs a few testRigor tests, and I don't want to have to actually understand how do I make that deployable into Kubernetes. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve there. And this is a little bit of how Testkube works itself. So there's two components to Testkube. There's the control plane, which is the orchestration layer. And then there are these agents. You can see the top box here. Those are going to be the execution engines. So the way we work is you deploy a control plane. You can do that on-prem or SaaS, and you deploy the agents into your environments where you need to be performing tests. The control plane connects back to the agents, manages that fleet of agents, and it's the UI that people are going to use to navigate the test catalog, navigate any test results that come back, create triggering mechanisms for the tests, and then also look at high-level trends. And through that control plane, we send our test workloads to these various environments. So as our deployment pipeline is working through dev, staging, and prod, or whatever your environments may be, this is just the most basic of environments. As we're moving through those different stages, we're performing our testing in each one consistently. So now what's the best way to do this? I think I can exit here and jump over into Testkube.
And John, you had a question there. It says, Testkube scales test execution by 200%.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So one of the great things about Kubernetes is that it's super scalable. And it's really easy to do horizontal scaling and take a sequential workload and execute it in parallel. So we had a customer, or someone who will soon be a customer, who their main problem was that they had a bunch of, not even open source, they just had a bunch of test scripts that they were running in their CI/CD pipeline, and they were running them basically sequentially. So they moved that to Testkube, and I think they moved from like 45-minute execution time down to like 5 or 10-minute execution time, just by the fact that they could just run a bunch of them in parallel, and Kubernetes makes it really, really easy to do that. So I'll briefly show you how you can do that in Testkube. The things I'm going to walk through will be the workflow catalog, the execution engine, general test observability and analytics. I'm not going to go into too deep detail because we don't have a ton of time left and want to leave time for questions. We will show that. So the first thing that we see when you come into Testkube is going to be the dashboard itself. And that's where we get a high-level view of all the activity that's occurring on this particular control plane. We can see some postman tests. We have some JUnits, unit test going on, some K6 load testing. And we can also see some high-level metrics that correspond to that test activity. The first thing that we'll look at is the workflow catalog. So a workflow is just a way to describe how to run the test you're trying to run in Kubernetes. It has some configuration stuff like how much resources to allocate to that test, and where to find the test files, and which container image to use, and then which steps you need to take, what commands do you need to inject into the container to actually execute the test, and then some instructions on how to pull back the results. That's all a workflow is. It's just that description. It's a YAML file. If we look at the testRigor workflow, so I set this up. I'll just flash the YAML on the screen really quick. This got all jumbled, unfortunately, but this is just a bunch of shell commands, right? So I can even just use shell commands. And it looked much prettier when I first copied and pasted it in for my IDE, but not so much anymore. But the point I'm trying to show here is even if the tool doesn't execute in Kubernetes, obviously testRigor executes their tests on their servers in their cloud. We can still interact with it by sending the API request to the testRigor service and saying, go run these tests. And we can still collect the results back in Testkube. So we'll come look at those in a second. But just going back to the workflow catalog, this is our collection of workflows. Again, we're trying to deploy these to different environments where we're trying to run our tests. For a lot of teams who are trying to enhance test case discoverability, where you have underutilized tests, you can build out different views that will allow teams to parse through this catalog and find things that they could apply to their scenario. And the other thing that you can implement will be templates, which will allow you to take components or reusable parts of the workflow and just reuse them in multiple workflows. This is, again, particularly helpful for like QA teams who are building the workflows, but they may not know like how to deploy secrets into Kubernetes. So you just make a template that does that, and then you can just go do it in your workflows, reference that template. Now, on the execution side, there's a number of different ways we can trigger these workflows. I should go back to testRigor. As you saw, I manually did that through the UI by clicking Run Now. This is pretty cool for teams who are kind of locked into CI/CD and can't just run some of their like larger open source unit tests or open source test suites from their CI/CD pipeline. They just want to run one of them. That lets them do that outside of their CI/CD pipeline. But of course, we can still integrate with CI/CD. We have a CLI, which gives you access to pretty much all of the functionality of Testkube. And you can plug into any automation tool super easily to kick off test cases inside Testkube. And for teams who are trying to schedule nightly builds or nightly executions, you can set up schedules for your tests to run, and that will obviously automatically run those tests. And then the other way that you can set up a trigger point is through Kubernetes events. So some teams are moving to asynchronous workflows where they want to trigger the tests based on the actual things that are deployed into their cluster. And this lets you build event monitors that watch for the resources, and when it sees the appropriate resource change in the appropriate way, it triggers one or more tests, and that's what we're seeing with the CML here. Another thing worth mentioning about the execution side of things, I talked about this from, from the nature of how the tool works, where you have a control plane managing a fleet of agents. I'd just like to emphasize that I can run this particular or any testing workload on any one of these clusters, any one of these environments, by just pointing to the agent that corresponds to that environment and saying, go run there. I don't have to deploy anything else, just that one agent. So particularly for, let's say, load testing, if I have to apply load from different geographies, I can just spin up a cloud in APAC, Europe, US, wherever, and then I can just put an agent in each one and then go deploy the tests there, and I can drive load from all of those locations really easily. Let's see. The other thing to talk about here is, let me just pop open a K6 test. Let me go back here. Just to show that parallelism. This is what it looks like in practice, where I have one test workflow that's spawning 3 workers as part of that test workflow. So I have mechanisms for sharding my test cases. If I pull a test suite with 500 tests from Git, I could shard it across 5 different workers, 100 test cases in each worker, and that would let me execute those in parallel. So it's something that we see a lot of teams doing. And then I'll also show up another important part of execution, which is dependency management. And I picked the wrong one. And that's accomplished using services. So if I have, for example, a database full of synthetic data that I know I need to launch for a particular test because it has preceded data that is specific for that test, I can encapsulate that in a service. And then when I launch my test workflow, it launches that service. And then it's easy for the containers in that test workflow to reference that service. It sets up all the networking for you, and you don't have to worry about doing that yourself. And you can just pull the data right from the database. Or a mock is something else that we see really often. In this case, it's some Selenium nodes for different browsers. And last thing that I'll mention here, I'm just checking my list, make sure I talk about everything quick since I'm moving through things, is just the execution dashboard. So I'm actually I'm gonna hop over into a dev instance. This is something we're releasing next week, which is why I feel comfortable showing this. But this is a dashboard that lets you look at the executions that are occurring on the control plane, similar to the home screen, but with a lot more filters. And the key filter here is the ability to filter by tags. So when I run a test workflow and create an instance of an execution, I can apply a tag to it, like a release number or a Jira ticket or something like that. And then I can build views that let me filter on those tags, which would help me parse out through all of the test results that are occurring and kind of pinpoint the problems. That's one of the big challenges that we see is people maybe running 30,000, 40,000 tests, 5-10% of them fail. Now, how do I parse through 3,000 tests every morning, right? This will help alleviate that kind of long manual effort. But to talk a little bit more at the test case level, the kind of results that are generated. Ooh, this failed. Interesting. I bet that's because we only have one agent assigned to,
Yeah. So once again, just to go over that. So testRigor is all based on parallels. John has only been given one parallel or one AI agent. So that means his test cases are going to run one after another after another.
Cool. So the types of test results that we get back when we execute a test, all of the log output is streamed back to the test workflow. So you can see here, I set up the script to check for test results, and until it gets the test results, it'll keep doing that check. When we did get test results from testRigor, I formatted those to be ingested as JUnit. So we can see that we get the test results here as of the individual tests that Bruno built. And we can see the past status of them. If they failed, we get some information on why they failed. And then any other artifacts that are generated. In this case, we have no other artifacts, but think of like a tool that takes a screenshot or something like that. Maybe it just generates an HTML report, like in K6, like a load testing tool that would show up here, and then we can always have access to that. And these records don't go away. So for teams that are required to keep a record of their testing, this can be helpful. And again, going back to that execution dashboard, you can always parse through old executions and find what test did we run 5 releases ago, and did that load test actually pass because we had some issue that just cropped up due to scale or something like that. The other thing worth mentioning here is that we keep track of the resource utilization of the execution itself. So again, particularly for load tests, but any test, we can understand how much compute resources that test is using, and we can tune our Kubernetes clusters appropriately. We can also use it for debugging in case that there's some kind of throttling issue that we're seeing based on the test execution. And the other way that we can get some information about the test, you can see this green check mark up here. This is a health check. So that helps us understand the health of the workflow itself. So if we have a workflow that's running a lot of flaky tests, we would see that health start to drop. And if that was actually the result of a single workflow. But you can see the health changing of my different workflows here, where we have this kind of stormy icon versus a sunny icon versus very, very bad, things are not going well here. And when these tests fail, we'll see the status of the test change accordingly. Pass, fail, but abort is also something that's really helpful because that tells us if something in the cluster failed, not the tests themselves. So again, going back to the theme of kind of inspecting these test results and parsing through them quickly. Is it my tests failing? Are they flaky? Or is it more the infrastructure that's failing? Last thing I'll mention is an AI chatbot that you can use to interact with the test results and ask it questions. Why did this K6 test fail, for example? And we're running up on time. So the last area I'll jump into is just the analytics. And this is going to be about building dashboards, and it's about building metrics across executions. So probably the most straightforward chart we can build here is execution count. So show me the number of executions that meet a filter criteria. Maybe all the executions that were tagged with a certain tag, like load testing. And then I can segment those by, for example, status, which will show me all the pass, fail, aborted, and canceled workflows. But obviously I could get more sophisticated using the different labels that I can apply to the workflows to build more pinpointed data representations through this chart. We can also do aggregate resource utilization. So if I want to see the resources consumed by all of my security tests, I could do that. And that would, again, help me figure out, do I need to expand the resources of my cluster, bring out dedicated node pools, whatever it may be. JUnit case count. This will show me the total volume of JUnit test results we've generated, in this case, each day. And then I can go and inspect that further to see, all right, show me all the past JUnit test cases and parse through that. And then we have different types of charts that we can build for things like pass-fail statistics, And this efficiency quadrant, which I like to show as it demos nicely, where this is highlighting long-running tests. You can see down on the x-axis we have time, and we have a number of tests that are clustered on the multi-day end of the spectrum. So I may want to go in and figure out, why am I having such a hard time with Cypress? Why does it take so long to run? Not very efficient. So that could go help me figure things like that out. All right, so that's everything that I wanted to show. Again, the 4 big things being the catalog, the execution engine, the test observability / test inspection aspect, and then all the analytics. All right, so I'll go back to my webinar, view, slideshow. And that's it. So we promised 3 steps to speed things up. Step 1 was to watch the webinar. Everyone's done with step 1. Step 2, if you feel motivated, start a POC, play with one of these tools. As I mentioned in the chat, I have a sandbox, and I know Bruno has ways of giving out free trials.
Yep.
And then you're off to happy testing.
Yeah. Awesome. And John, we do have one question in the chat there, or in the Q&A area.
Yeah, Bruno, I saw you answered this, but I'll just go ahead and toss it up there, and you can kind of explain your answer quick.
Yeah. So we were talking earlier about the executing of the test case because John was seeing that slowness. Once again, John was only licensed for a single AI agent. So because of that, those test cases are going to run sequentially, one after another, because of limited resources. But if we provided John with 5 AI agents, then he could run 5 test cases in parallel. So there definitely is an option for running things in parallel and even scheduling them in parallel, but it's a matter of having the resources from the start. So great question there. And then there was another question about what are the main things to consider when choosing an automated testing solution? And, obviously this really comes down to, I think there's a handful of different ways to answer this, but one of the first things I'm going to question is skill set of the people that you have, because let's say you do have a bunch of testers that are very well versed in writing code, then you got an awesome deal on a tester. But when it comes down to looking at things from a testRigor perspective, it's all about speeding up the test creation. And by allowing non-technical or less technical people the ability to create those tests, that's going to be a huge deciding factor. Do I want a tool that only my developers can use? Or do I want a tool that I can literally give to anybody and they can figure it out because it's that simple? So I hope that helps answer that question.
We're agnostic to the tool you run. We'll happily run whatever you want, whether it's Dockerized or outside of Testkube and something like testRigor where you can just make an API call and kick it off. We're happy.
Great. And I believe that was our last question. If anyone else has any more, feel free to toss them in or, get in contact with us. There was the QR codes. We'll be sending out a recording of this webinar, as well as we'll send out kind of the slide deck as well. So feel free to review it, ask any questions to Bruno or John. Separately. They're pretty great guys, pretty good answers as well. So thank you so much for everyone attending. Any final thoughts?
None from me, but very excited to be involved in this webinar. So thanks for the invite.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Cheers.